Assalamu alaikum everybody. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. We begin in the name of Allah. All praise and glory be to Allah, and may His finest peace and blessings be upon His Messenger Muhammad and his family and his companions and all those who tread his path. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us and you a life upon His path and a death while closely adhering to His guidance and a reunion around Him. Allahumma ameen. May Allah Azza wa Jal make all of our actions righteous and make them sincerely for His sake, and not to allow any of His creation a share of our intentions. Allahumma ameen. So Jazakallah khairan for coming through and for your punctuality. And I ask Allah at the onset of this gathering to allow us to reach the month of Ramadan in the best of states and readier than we've ever been, inshaAllah ta'ala. So the topic that was chosen was a crash course on the Fiqh of Fasting. And what is fiqh? Okay, so understanding is fiqh. What else is the term fiqh often used for? Anybody else? Huh? Yeah, the laws, right? The legal code, the rules and regulations, the judgments, the legal judgments in Islam. The study of them is known as fiqh, right? And because it requires sort of a higher level of understanding, the Quran is approachable to us all, and it should be, and shaitan should never trick us otherwise. But to extract rulings takes a heightened degree of understanding, right? That's different, to derive law from the Quran. And so the science of Islamic law is often referred to as fiqh, especially when it's a derived law. It's not like a straightforward law. Allah is one is not fiqh. Muhammad is the prophet is not fiqh. We pray 5 times a day is not fiqh. Murder is haram. That's not fiqh. It's straightforward. You don't need to, have a certain skill set or specialize to know that. But the derived rulings, especially those of practice, day-to-day practice, is often known as fiqh. However, that is not necessarily the end of the story. You see, the early Muslims used to use the term fiqh for not just the most complex, like law, topics in the deen, but also the most important aspects that one should understand about the deen. For instance, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah famously wrote a book called Al-Fiqh Al-Akbar, the most important fiqh, the great fiqh. And that was a book of doctrine, a book of theology, a book on our beliefs, right? Because a Muslim needs to understand these things. And the early Muslims would often use the term fiqh, and this is what I'm getting to here, would often use the term fiqh with regards to understanding the priorities of this deen in terms of the science of the interior, right? The spiritual purity that our deen placed near the very top of the list. Does that make sense? So for instance, the great Al-Hasan Al-Basri rahimahullah was an early scholar who, developed a unique grasp of many of the Islamic sciences. He was an orphan that was raised by the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Salama radiallahu anha. He never got to meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but I'm just trying to illustrate for you just how early he was, right? So he learned at the hands of they count about 300 companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Biographers count about 300 that he's gotten to interact with and take from. And so one time, a man came to him and asked him about a legal ruling, right? Halal, haram type stuff. And so he mentioned to him his understanding on the issue. And then the man responded back to him, and this wasn't very appropriate, yani. He said to him, the fuqaha is the plural of faqih. Faqih is a fiqh expert, okay? So the fuqaha, the jurists of Islamic law, right? The scholars of fiqh have said otherwise. That's inappropriate because, if you're asking me, that means you believe I'm credible. So, why are you coming to ask me if you already know what other scholars are asking? Are you a troublemaker? It's a red flag. Maybe there's something suspicious about you. Maybe there's something wrong with your heart. And so when he said to him, the fuqaha have said otherwise, the scholars of fiqh, he meant legal rulings, have said otherwise, he said to him, وَهَلْ رَأَيْتَ فَقِيهًا قَطْ? Have you ever met an expert on fiqh? He said, the expert on fiqh is الزاهد في الدنيا الراغب في الآخرة الدائب في العبادة, is the one that is disinterested in this world. He's not trying to build palaces, he's not trying to win arguments, right? The one that is disinterested in this world. And the one that is driven by his pursuit of the hereafter. And the one that is dedicated, has a lot of devotion in his worship, in his devotion to Allah Azza wa Jal. And in some narrations he says, the one who says his piece and walks away whether to accept it or not. I'm not going to sit here and go back and forth with people and blacken my heart with argumentation to the end of it. And so this is just to show you that spiritual purity is what Al-Hasan al-Basri was telling people. By the way, if you're going to go around collecting rulings, legal rulings on how to do stuff in Islam, or simply just argue with people, you're tokenizing even the rules for the sake of self-promotion, then you've missed the understanding of one of the most important dimensions of Islam, which is the heart within your chest. If you don't understand yourself and how well you're doing and why you're worshiping and how well you're worshiping, then what have you really understood? Even if the world recognizes you as an expert and a scholar, right? So may Allah grant us understanding about Him, say Ameen, that transforms us into better people in our profile in front of Him, Allahumma Ameen, and then in front of His creation, Allahumma Ameen. So that whole preface was my justification for why I want to begin our discussions on fasting with understanding why we fast before we get into how to fast. All right? So why do we fast? Many of you know this, and maybe we can sort of make it an exercise that we together get better at articulating this to our coworkers, our classmates, our colleagues. Why do we fast? To empathize with the needy. Who agrees? Raise your hand. Okay. Does fasting generate empathy? Like you feel what the hungry feel, those that live with food insecurity feel? It does. But is that the point of fasting? Is that the why? The reason why it can't be the ultimate why, right, or even the primary why, is because those who are hungry also need to fast. So if that was the point, the whole point, right, then you'd say, hey, you people who haven't gone hungry for a while, go hungry a little bit. But why do the hungry fast? Obviously, if you're starving, if you're malnourished, if you're ill, we'll get to that, you're exempt from fasting. Okay? But if a person is simply, someone that knows hunger all too well, but they are physically capable of fasting those few hours, right? They got to fast them. So let's look deeper. Why do we fast? To attain taqwa. Why else? Okay. To develop patience. Very good. Why else? Yeah. So we got taqwa. We got developing patience. Why else? Allah Azza wa Jal said so. I'll take it. Same thing? Okay, very good. All of those. Obviously, Allah Azza wa Jal said to us to fast, but we're trying to reflect here on some of the major objectives, the higher goals of the fast, which Allah told us, right? So we have to begin there. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامِ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُمْ. Oh, you have believed, fasting has been prescribed on you. You got to take your prescription, or else you fall apart, right? It's been prescribed on you, like it's been prescribed on those before you, so that you may attain taqwa. Why is the ayah saying like those who were before you? What are we supposed to get from that? Why is he telling us that, by the way, fasting is not just for you guys, the nations before you also had to fast? Tell me.
We're not the only ones who are going to be fasting.
Why do we need to know that we're not the only ones who are fasting? Not why did they fast? What do we benefit from knowing that Allah called the nations before us, obviously through the prophets, the nations before us to fast? Huh? How does that encourage us? I'm sorry, again. Say it again. Yeah. So one of my sort of remote teachers, someone that doesn't know I exist, but I benefited a lot from across the globe, Dr. Saeed Al-Kamani is a great contemporary Moroccan scholar. He says, some scholars have said in their books that Allah said, fasting has been written on you, like it was written on those before you, to almost console you. Like, I know fasting's tough and stuff, but you're not the only ones. I made them do it too. And he gets a little bit worked up about this interpretation. And he says, I wish I could erase that from the books. I wish they never said that. And I don't think we need to be that assertive about this opinion. But he wanted to call our attention to another interpretation that is much more empowering, right? That the greats before you were greats. The believers before you stayed believers, right? The righteous before you were able to stay righteous or be righteous because they had this treasure with them called fasting, right? And so you don't underestimate it. You make sure you hold on to it if you want to be on their path. Don't miss out on what is only attainable through fasting. They did it. They reached a certain height. You will never reach it without committing yourself to this great sacred act of worship. Make sense? And there's a hadith to corroborate this. Like, there's the hadith of Abu Umama radiallahu anhu. He mentions that a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he came to him right after a battle. Like, the man has already sacrificed so much, right? And it's almost like the man is saying, I couldn't reach the station of martyrdom, or like Allah hasn't chosen me the way He chose my brothers in this battle. And so what can I do? Like, I want to race. Tell me something to do. The best thing to do right now in downtime, since jihad's over, gotta wait for the next one or something. He said to him, عَلَيْكَ بِالصَّوْمِ فَإِنَّهُ لَا عِدْلَ لَهُ. Stick to fasting. Fast more and more, because there's no equivalent to fasting. There's no equivalent to it. Okay, so Allah said fast like the greats before you, so you can be great like them, so that you may attain taqwa. What is taqwa? Taqwa comes from the same root as the word wiqaya. Wiqaya is like a shield, right? Like a shield that you protect yourself with. So taqwa many times is translated as like the fear of God. And in fact, you shield that which you're afraid. You shield yourself from that which you're afraid of. Not God, obviously. That which would subject you to Allah's anger, right? So that's the relationship between taqwa and sort of like protection or avoidance or fear. It causes you to have reverential fear, healthy fear that will protect you, okay? I know in our society nowadays, in sort of modern or popular thought, they downplay the use of fear. But Allah who created us knows that if there isn't some fear in the tank, or enough fear in the tank, we become monsters, okay? We just drown. We sink into delusion. We sink into corruption. Anything becomes possible. And so fasting has been prescribed for you like it was prescribed for those before you so that you attain taqwa. One of the perhaps better translations of taqwa is God consciousness. People just shy away from it because it's a bigger word and it might require more unpacking. But to be conscious of Allah, to be alert to the divine reality, to Allah Azza wa Jal being the Almighty, to Allah deserving to be the center of our attention. Fasting comes to do that for you. Whether you can explain it in this way, right? No, you can just adopt it. It gets carved into your life through fasting. Let me demonstrate for you how. Because you may not even realize it. How Siyam recenters and restores, the divine, Allah, right, in your life. First day of fasting, I have to go get my coffee. Then I'm like, I gotta go grab my coffee. It's coffee time, right? It's my habit. It's Ramadan. That's right, it's Ramadan. I forgot. That was crazy. Let me go back to work, right? You know what just happened there? You may not even feel it, but subconsciously, you're reminding yourself, reinforcing yourself that He's the master. I'm the servant. He calls the shots. I am, I have no say with Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the way I want it to be. Also, it's not like, Allah Azza wa Jal does things for His benefit at our expense. He calls us to these things for our benefit, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it does that. Like you think of like a cup of anything, water or coffee, or like a minute before Maghrib, this is haram to drink. Same exact cup, adhan goes off. It is not even just halal to drink. It is recommended for you to rush breaking your fast. Prophet ﷺ discouraged us from delaying the breakage of the fast. So what's the difference? The same cup. Allah said so. That's the difference, right? Suhoor time, right? You want to drink it. You drink it and you're... Some people, at suhoor, they scramble, right? Just wiping the table down, making sure everything is... Why? Because adhan's coming, right? The adhan's about to stop us. One of my shuyukh used to say, he goes, I don't know why people go into like panic mode during suhoor. It's almost as if they're afraid to go hungry. And he says, you're supposed to go hungry. That's the point. Of course, that needs to be properly explained sometimes as well, right? Like non-Muslims, I remember many times non-Muslims told me, you Muslims, you guys fast and stuff. You guys are crazy. I said, what do you mean? You guys fast for a whole month? We say, no, we don't fast. We just fast for the... Who's ever gotten that, right? They think we fast for 30 days, right? So they, no, it's just like the daylight hours, basically, of each day, and then we eat every night. Say, oh, okay. But still, though, that's crazy. Like, why would you do that to yourself? Why would you starve yourself? We say, we're not starving ourselves. I often try to tell them, by the way, that humans can live for, if you're healthy and you have water, by the way, you can live for how long without food? More. Depends on who you are, right? You can live for 2 weeks. Some people can make it 3 weeks without food, as long as there's water, right? So no one's fasting more than 24 hours, 22 hours, right? 20 hours. That's it. And so I'm not starving myself. I'm not even hurting myself. If it hurts, like medically speaking, I'm not even supposed to fast. I don't have to fast. But I'm just tasting a bit of hunger. Because in tasting a bit of hunger is so many benefits, right? So being conscious of Allah through the stop and go is one part. But being conscious of Allah, the perfect, the almighty, the infinite, the eternal, the one who has no needs, is made easier by recognizing your needs, right? Al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, they asked him, أَيَرِقُّ الْقَلْبُ مَعَ الشِّبْعِ? Can the heart become soft on a full stomach? And he said, لا أرى. I don't see how that's possible. Maybe, he's saying maybe, like 1 in a million chance, but, and you know this, you know if you make dua before you break your fast, how broken you feel and how intimate the dua is before Maghrib. And then as soon as you just down those 2 cups of water, milk, and those 13 dates you're going to have, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. And so at that juncture of recognizing just how fragile you are, you're a day or two, a meal or two from falling apart, right? That brings you to Allah Azza wa Jalla by recognizing not only is He perfect and He doesn't need and He doesn't drink, but also it brings you to Allah, taqwa, consciousness of Allah, through recognizing that my food and my drink and my air come from Him, right? Yet another reflection on how to become God conscious through fasting. You may not even realize it. And that's why, subhanAllah, so much of the discussion on ibadah, devoting our lives to Allah in the Quran, is connected to food and drink, right? Doesn't Allah Azza wa Jal tell Quraysh, what is wrong with you? فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ. Why are they not worshipping the Lord of this great house, the Kaaba? الَّذِي أَطْعَمَهُم مِّن جُوعٍ وَأَمَنَهُم مِّن خَوْفٍ. The one who secured them from their fears and fed them, didn't let them starve. Right? Or the other ayah that says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I didn't create the humans or the jinn except to like worship me, devote their lives to me. You know, it's Allah who knows our minds, knows that some of us are going to think, or shaitan's going to tell us, but why does God create us just to worship Him? What does He get out of it? The very next ayah says what? What does the next ayah say? I didn't create the humans or the jinn except to worship me. I don't need from them to provide for me. Disclaimer, I don't need for them to provide for me. وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَن يُطْعِمُونَ. I don't need for them to feed me. I'm not fed by their worship. Right? Then the third ayah goes on to say, إِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الرَّزَّاقُ ذُو الْقُوَّةِ الْمَتِينَ. Allah is the provider of all, the bearer of great strength, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are, subhanAllah, some of the major avenues of how fasting can make us more conscious of Allah. And that is more fulfilling for us. That is what restores meaning and purpose in our lives. And don't underestimate these things. You know, some people are born into Islam, and so they take for granted what it's like, you know, to have Islam in your life. You know, to have these seasons where you are put a little bit more effort to remember that, I live by a code from the heavens. I don't serve anything on earth that came from dust and returns to dust. What that does for a person's meaningfulness. And to give you a contrast, since many of us could be born into Islam and not appreciate this firsthand, look at the people who serve worldly aims, whatever they may be. Whether it is their careers, whether it is popularity, whether it is some fantasy in this world about like where happiness supposedly comes from. Look at the world today, when it is stripped of meaning, when it is purposeless. People are struggling now more than ever. It's not a coincidence that when you remove God from the center of people's worldview, the mental health illness spikes and the suicide rates are higher than ever, and the opioid overdose caused deaths are more than ever before, unprecedented numbers. And hostility and violence and insecurity, all of that is going through the roof. It's not a coincidence. And so Siyam, of what it does, is that it puts Allah back in your life with greater meaning, greater purpose. Because we can live without material comforts as human beings, but we cannot live without purpose. You know, the people in, subhanAllah, in the most comfortable parts of the world, sadly, nowadays live in also the most incoherent parts of the world. They live in godless cultures. And so they're in more pain than ever. They have the least life satisfaction, statistically. And then you see the people that are in the more difficult circumstances around the world, right? The poor and the war-torn and otherwise, but they see life as purposeful. They report higher life satisfaction. They may not be happier in the material sense, like I don't get to enjoy as much pleasures, right? But I'm more content with life because it has meaning. So it shows you that meaning is more valuable than comfort. Purpose is more valuable than pleasures, gratification. And so restoring the centrality of the divine in your life through fasting restores meaning, which is everything. And then it is the sweetest thing. You know, knowing Allah Azza wa Jal also is not a theoretical. You know, Abu Sulaiman al-Darani, one of the early Muslims, I love this statement of his. They asked him, how does a person know Allah? Like really get close to Allah and experience knowledge, acquaintance with Allah Azza wa Jal. And he said, what do you think he said? You think read a book, read the Quran, read another book, read the Sunnah, right? That's where I'm going to learn about Allah. And that's true, of course. But he wanted to move them, inch them forward, that the problem is if you think that's enough. That's the problem. He said, بِطَاعَتِهِ, by obeying Allah, the act of obedience. The acts of obedience enlighten you more about Allah Azza wa Jal. Experientially, you experience Allah more when you obey Him. Otherwise, think about it. Like, aren't there people that know more about Islam than me and you combined? Aren't there people who for 10, 20, 30 years, their full-time job is to dig through our books to sort of supposedly disprove Islam? Aren't there people like this? Do they enjoy our faith? Do they feel nearness to Allah? No, they don't. Right? Aren't there some people with less book knowledge have far greater faith, far stronger faith, far sweeter faith than some of the scholars of this ummah? Yes, sir. Absolutely. And so that's a fourth angle now of how devoting yourself to Allah removes some of these layers of access. When you truly glorify Him in your behavior, that's when you have greater access to experiencing Him. And our scholars said this is found straightforwardly in Al-Fatiha. You ever noticed in Al-Fatiha? In the interest of time, I will just read to you the translation. We say, all praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Right? The most merciful, the granter of mercy, owner of the day of judgment. All of that is what? You're talking about Allah. Right? All praise be for Allah, Lord of the worlds. He is the most merciful, the granter of mercy. He is the owner of the day of judgment. Then something very interesting happens. What's the next ayah? You we worship. Did you notice that? Ever notice that before? That grammatical shift. You're speaking about Allah, all of a sudden you're speaking to Allah. Why the shift? The scholar said it is as if Allah is teaching us that only through glorifying Him, not lip service, really praising Him, living a life that reflects that you praise Allah, you see Him as the perfect, you deal with Him as if He is the worthiest of our love. When you recognize that, that is when the curtains get lifted a little bit, right? That's when you're in the presence of the King, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isn't that beautiful? So Allah obligates you at least once a year to tap into this access point called devotional fasting. So you can have better consciousness of Him, which is the greatest this world has to offer, and the point behind the creation of this universe, and the number one factor we will be responsible for when everything is said and done, when the dust of this world clears and we wind up on the Day of Judgment. May Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to find His pleasure and His forgiveness awaiting us at the end of our journeys. Say Ameen. So that's being conscious of Allah. That's the first reason you guys mentioned. The other reason is to develop patience. Develop patience. Siyam is of the greatest tools to help you develop, what's patience? The ability to withstand, right? So everything falls under that. Endurance, patience, perseverance, self-restraint, right? And what many people nowadays fail because of, in so many spheres, not just the religious commitment, is their inability to tolerate frustration, right? Your inability, so we live lives of entitlement. We're so used to just swiping the screen and I'm getting something dropped at my door tomorrow morning, right? Because I have Amazon Prime. Right or wrong? That's fine. It's not haram to have Amazon Prime, I hope. But you have to be careful that if you're always able to get what you want, we all have little children inside of us, right? You start becoming incapable with dealing with a no when life says no. And life will always tell you no, more than you like. I know you want life, oh human being, to be paradise, but that's not here. You got off on the wrong floor. It's not here. It's the next floor. This life was never meant to satisfy you. What Allah wants to give you in the next life can't fit in this world. This world has a different function. This is the exam room, right? And so there's going to be test after test. If Allah spares you from one test for wisdom that He knows, you're going to go through another test for justice that He perfects, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So life's going to be like this. And then, people, I have a friend, a colleague, one of the mashayikh actually, he used to work in the Apple store. And I forgot which one it was. It may have been the iPhone 6. But, release date of a new phone, and lines are out the door, and this teenage girl finally gets her chance. She's at the counter, and he tells her, okay, which one do you want? She says, I want the rose one. He goes to the back. He's like, I only have whatever the two other colors were. And he's like, well, listen, I can give you this phone for now. Your phone will come in 2 days. Your color will come in 2 days. He says, she had a meltdown in front of me. She grabbed her head like this. What do you mean I'm going to go to school tomorrow without the phone? When everyone else has the new phone? What do you mean? You know, we may take it for granted, but these little acts of worship that are a little bit demanding of us, this spares us a little bit, not entirely, from some of this. Because it is kind of like challenging to get up in the cold and pray Fajr. It is kind of challenging to break my coffee habit. It is kind of challenging, the boundaries of the deen. But these actually liberate you from being dependent on having everything in a moment's notice, because that'll never be. Right? That is the idea. And so it walks us through exercises that develop restraint. Because restraint and tolerance is a muscle. It's a muscle. Our Prophet ﷺ, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, was so wise when he said, I love this hadith. He says, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ وَإِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ وَإِنَّمَا الصَّبْرُ بِالتَّصَبُّرِ. That knowledge is through learning. Obviously, where do you get knowledge from? Learning. Knowledge is only through learning. And forbearance, you guys know what forbearance is? Like putting up with offenses, basically. To be forbearing. To be able to tolerate provocation. Someone provokes you. He says, hilm, forbearance, is through exercising forbearance. Bittahallum, with wrestling yourself to be forbearing. Practice. Practice makes perfect, basically. إنما الحلم بالتحلم وإنما الصبر بالتصبر. And patience is only through practicing patience. What is the connection? Think with me, guys and gals. What is the connection between knowledge is through learning and, why did he begin saying something that we all already know? Knowledge is only through learning. There's a beauty here in his, his choice of explanation, alayhi salatu wassalam. He says you're not going to have knowledge without learning. And you're not going to have patience, forbearance without practicing it. Why did he say that? Because people think they're two different things. Everyone knows that you gotta go through the process of education, learning to have knowledge. Nobody accepts, oh, I'm just dumb, sorry. No, you gotta learn. I'm sorry. You gotta put in the work and learn. He's trying to tell you, he wants you to know forbearance the same way. You can't just say, oh, that's their problem. I'm an angry person. They shouldn't take me off. Right? No, that's unacceptable. You got to learn how to not become angry. You got to learn your triggers. You got to learn how to self-restrain. You got to learn how to keep yourself in check. It's learnable. So it's as if he's saying, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the same way it's ludicrous to think this is just my nature. I'm unlearned. We're going to say unacceptable, learn. Don't say it's just your nature that I'm quick to frustration. I'm quick to lashing out. You got to learn. It's learnable. The same way you have a mental muscle, per se, you have also an ethical muscle, a self-restraint muscle. You got to develop it, and it can be developed. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. And so fasting is of the mandatory, modes of that boot camp. You are obligated in fasting to invest a little bit for everything. If you don't have restraint, you won't be able to do anything at all, right? You won't be able to take care of your body. You'll just, health-wise, physical health, you'll be no good. You won't be able to have a relationship, right? Relationships are built on compromise. They are, right? Who's married here? Thank you for agreeing. Marriage is a negotiation. You have to be able to restrain yourself from getting all that you want in the blink of an eye. Doesn't work like this. If you want to memorize the Quran, it's going to require this of you, right? You have to be resilient. Whatever you want, you're going to need to develop frustration tolerance, self-restraint. Fasting is a primary, crash course to do just that. And you will never find greater motivation to be self-restrained than Allah Himself, subhanahu wa ta'ala. That He brags of you, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, I'll tell you guys a funny story. Bismillah. I walked into Whole Foods and I was getting a coffee. Not today. So, like in the coffee line, the lady at the counter like shouted over me to the guy behind me in line. He was the last guy in line. And she said to him, anybody who comes after you, tell them we're closed. I am legally entitled to a lunch break 30 minutes ago. It was like, I think New Year's Day, and like the co-worker never showed up and stuff. She was so tight. She was so angry. And so she tells him, I'm legally entitled to, and like by the time I got to the counter, 3-4 people tried to sort of like, you know, addendum to the line. And she kept saying the same line. I'm legally entitled. Don't worry, it's a very far away state. You can interview all the Whole Fooders here. You'll never figure out who I'm talking about. And so I get there, order my coffee. The next day, I'm driving through again. It was right in front, like close to our hotel. And I get there, and she seems a little bit more, you know. And so I just, for da'wah purposes, I said to her, I was with my daughter, and I was like, I'm glad you're feeling better today. And she was just like, oh, she remembered. And I had just read like a psych study about how they put like I think 200 healthy middle-aged women. Immediately I thought of Siyam, right? Through 18 hours a day of intermittent fasting. Okay? And basically the results were that while they did find themselves to feel more irritable, it was a bit challenging, right, for them, they also reported a greater sense of pride, a greater sense of achievement, a greater sense of self-control, and they felt like something was changing about them. So I, like, not in this geeky way, but I sort of just said that to her. By the way, you know, look on the bright side. The challenges of life don't break us. They make us stronger. You just stay optimistic and things like this. And that's why people who go through fasting report X, Y, and Z. I said it like that in passing. She said, but it's different. You fast for the love of God. I was fasting against my will. And, you know, I had no reason to disagree with her, right or wrong. Like, I already made my point, and she recognized that fasting is superior when you're doing it yourself, right? And wallahi, sincerity for Allah is the greatest motivating factor. You want to quit smoking, you know, you want to pray your 5, just ask yourself, why am I doing this? If it becomes clear for you, you strip away all the fog and it's clear for you it's for Allah, it'll be so worth it. And then be so easy. And then you will be so assisted. And so Allah being the one to tell you gotta do it. Because you know with voluntary fasting, you can fast not, of course it's for Allah, but like it doesn't have the same degree of urgency. But I need to fast for Allah here. It's extremely motivating. Even the fear factor, once again, you know, we'll leave that because we're going to pray Asr in a little bit. The third reason that we can sort of invoke here to remind ourselves of why we fast, fasting helps us liberate our spirits, right? It helps us leverage more focus, invest more of our attention in our spirit over our body. Because you know, it is very consuming to the bandwidth of our brains even, right? Like, when you're not fasting, it's like, okay, I'm going to have breakfast. Okay, I need a snack now. Now I need to get to the bathroom. And then, what are we going to have for lunch, though? I had that yesterday. Where else? Where am I going to? I want to try something new. Let me Google the word halal near me, right? This is not just a physical sort of problem anymore, right? It is now sort of so much focus. When will the spirit ever have room to rise? And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes you to pull back the attention, it's off your radar, right? You're not thinking. After the first day or two of fasting, you break those habits, it's khalas, like there's no food. And is that a big deal? It's a very big deal. Because Allah created you from a body and a spirit, and there will forever be a tug of war between them. And it's an awesome trade-off, because are we primarily body or primarily spirit? Think about how much we invest in our bodies, how we look, how we feel, how we're fed, right? Think about that. Are we a spirit or a body, or like both, half-half, 70-30? Give me some theories, guys. Huh? Half-half, okay. We got one half and half. What else do we have? Any light cream here? 80-20. 80-20, okay. Who agrees with half and half? Raise your hand. Who agrees with 80-20? And the rest of you believe that voting is haram. I've never had someone answer to that joke. Okay. But we actually don't know the number, of course. But just think about it like this. What's more important, the body or the spirit? What am I? Am I like a physical body that sort of has like a spirit? Because you know, people nowadays that are not blessed with the guidance of Islam, they sit there and they just like make stuff up. I'm the spiritual type. I'm not the spiritual type. We don't care what you think you are. I mean, I don't mean that. Be polite. Tell me, Muhammad, be polite. Okay? It doesn't make a difference. Can you imagine a bodybuilder that says, I don't believe I have legs, that's why I work out my upper body? Well, whether you believe you have legs or not, it doesn't make much of a difference. These twigs at the bottom don't match. You're doing yourself a disservice, right? So likewise, when someone thinks they don't have a spirit, they never address the spirit, right? Or they think that if you may not believe this, but we live this way, as if the spirit is something like secondary, right? We throw it a bone every here. But no, you're not a body. You are a spirit first. You are a spirit foremost. You are a spirit that lasts forever. You know, the scholars of Islam unanimously agree that the spirits were created before the bodies. Okay? So you're a spirit first. You're actually a spiritual being currently in this vehicle. Make sense? That's the paradigm shift I want you to have now. You're a spiritual being that Allah has currently installed in this vehicle. Once this vehicle serves its function, what's going to happen? Then you're going to be replaced with another vehicle that's more suited for the next phase of your existence. You understand? And so the spirit was first, that's the original, and the spirit is what's more important, because the spirit is what will last. And that's why, subhanAllah, it's interesting, the Quran also doesn't say that the spirit will die. It says, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Every soul, you know, ruh, nafs, it's interchangeable sometimes. The idea is the soul tastes death. And perhaps of the nuance and the beauty of tastes death as opposed to dies is that you experience death, but it doesn't mean you expire. You have to go through this experience to move on to your next phase. That is the idea. Because the spirit doesn't actually vanish, right? We know this from the ahadith. It goes up, comes back down, is resurrected. It doesn't vanish. So you are a spiritual being in a physical body, a very temporary one, and it's getting your undivided attention. It's unfortunate, right? Fasting says absolutely not. Time to reduce the attention on the body so that the spirit can have some room to rise. It's being suppressed all this time. Now let's address the spirit. And the same way the body came from the earth and we're focused on the food, all the food comes from the earth, doesn't it? Even your burger eats the grass from the earth. So it's like all here, right? Your spirit came from above. It needs to rise and it needs to connect with the upper world. The Quran that came from above. And that's of the reasons why the Quran is so emphasized in Ramadan. It is the means to nourishing your spirit. The same way your body is nourished by food and drink and oxygen and sort of the earthly resources, the spirit is nourished by knowing Allah and loving Him and fearing Him and hoping in Him and feeling close to Him. That's the nourishment of the spirit. That is its food and drink and oxygen. And if you don't do this, what happens? Then you're doing your humanness a great disservice. Right? Allah gave you a very special spirit that distinguished you from the animals, that distinguished you from all other creatures. That is why when I blew into him from my spirit, now prostrate to him. The spirit made you special, right? You're not here to eat and drink and make babies and then roll over and die. It's not why you're here. And so Ramadan is sort of a revisit of all of that. So you don't live the life of the animals in the shell of a human being. You know, the early Muslims used to say that the human being is in limbo between the world of the angels and the world of the animals. You know why? Because of the intellect that Allah Azza wa Jal gave you, right? He didn't give the animals the same type of intellect. Yes, animals are smart and know how to hunt and have better vision than us sometimes if we're thinking about hawks and eagles. And yeah, they have some advantages, but they don't have our intelligence, right? And so if you behave like them, you become lesser than the animals because they're sort of more excused than you because they didn't have the same intellectual, strength and skill that you had. So it makes you more blameworthy than the animal because you were given better tools to behave better, right? You just gave in to your desires. You didn't allow your intellect to reign in your desires, right? And then the angels, they said, the angels, it's not that they don't have intellect, it's that they don't have desires, but you do. And so now if you're able to restrain your desires, use that intellect of yours, focus on your spirit and restrain your desires and live for Allah, you become superior to the angel. Because even though the angel has no desires, or it's because the angel has no desires, that you outdid them. Despite your desires, you were grateful for your intellect and you lived the right way. Does that make sense? And so that is the potential of the human being, to be superior to the angels. And that is the resource Allah gave the human being in terms of that intellect and that spirit to not fall beneath the animals. And fasting comes in to give you a reset. Okay, let's start over. Okay, let's revive the spirit. Let's uncage the spirit. And also, obviously, that is why Ramadan, there's so much emphasis in the Quran. And the Quran, Allah called it Ruham min Amrina. Allah called the Quran a spirit or a soul from our commandment because it feeds our souls, right? Gives life to our true life, our true potential. And then we're going to come back and say, because we have to stop now, we're going to come back and say that it creates in us empathy, by us feeling hunger. That's part of taqwa. Being conscious of Allah, is more important than everything, but it includes all of these other things, right? Like caring for the needy and being charitable with others and not being so concerned about, am I going to have enough left over for me? And even these insecurities and these fears that, cause us to become greedy or cause us to be self-centered or selfish or otherwise, taqwa purges all of that. And that is why Siyam is such a great tool at creating people that have care for other people, that have true compassion for other people. So many of the early Muslims had, remarkable examples of this. One of the Salaf comes to mind that he used to fast every day and break his fast on 2 loaves of bread. That's all he had, or like all he would eat, and then come home. And so he was out, and a man came and asked him for food or money for food. So he gave him one of the 2 loaves of bread. And then he realized that was pointless, so he called him back. He said, come back. Here's the other loaf. And he says to him, because I know 1 loaf is not going to fill anybody or dispel the hunger, satisfy the hunger of anyone. So instead of both of us being hungry, let at least one of us have their fill today. And then he went home and repeated the fast for another day. Our mother Aisha radiallahu anha, some of the biographers mention that she fasted outside of the haram days, like Eid. You're not allowed to fast then. Or like, for example, when Allah obligates you to rest during your monthly cycle. She fasted the last 20 or more years of her life. And she was extraordinary in her philanthropy. Sometimes people would come to her and ask her for charity, and she would have the servant that would work with her give everything in the house, and then it would be time for her to break the fast, and then they would tell her there's nothing in the house. You gave it all to the last, person requesting assistance. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she used to say, لَوْ ذَكَّرْتِينِي لَفَعَلْتُ. Had you reminded me to leave some behind for Maghrib, I would have left some behind. She would forget herself in the service of others. That's how much empathy was cultivated through her day in and day out fasting. And it was also reported by Al-Izz ibn Abdul Salam, rahimahullah, that he reports that Yusuf alayhi salam, Prophet Yusuf lived through the famine, and he sort of managed the resources for the people during the famine, and so he would not eat until he fed everyone, his family and his neighbors and everyone he could reach. And so they used to criticize him for this and say, this doesn't make sense, eat first so you have some strength so that you can continue serving on a high level. And he would say back to them, Yusuf alayhi salam would say back to them, I am afraid that if I eat first, I forget what it feels like to be hungry. Because we all know there's hungry people out there. We all know the statistics about 1/3 of the world dealing with poverty or food insecurity or otherwise. But feeling it is different. And that is the beauty of the fast, right? Like if I tell you there are people in need, please donate, many of you will generously donate. But, as they say, seeing is believing. So if I play a video here of their actual conditions, you'll probably donate more, right? But if you went through their conditions, forget a picture, or a picture speaks 1,000 words. Living something does a completely different job of moving the hearts. And that's of the benefits, inshallah, of the fasting. And if you don't do this, then you know nothing of the human condition, but your ability to consume, right? Not to be selfless, but to be selfish. Ramadan is supposed to rinse us of that, to remove ourselves from the center of our lives. Allah is the center, and everything He loves is what matters most. The last thing, because they said Salah is at 4:15, and then we're going to get into the actual legal rulings of fasting. People often ask that if shaitan is locked up in Ramadan, then why do people do bad things in Ramadan? Like if shaitan's locked up. And the answer is that even though shaitan is locked up, that doesn't mean the stains of shaitan. This is one of many answers that are very legitimate, very strong answers, compelling reasoning, that the stains of shaitan remain on the human condition. And we're not all stained in the same way. We all need rinsing, but how much rinsing? So there are qualities that shaitan has sort of habituated us into, or like abducted us into. The scholars sometimes, they to help you self-diagnose a little bit, how much stain is there. They put them in 2 buckets. Some give it a little bit more subdividing, and they give you 4 buckets. I'll give you the 4-prong quickly. They say that some human beings, they don't need shaitan there anymore because they've given in so much to their, they call them as-sifatul bahimiyya, which is the qualities of livestock. I told you about the angels, humans, animals, right? So consider the livestock. Imagine like a cow, A'azzakumullah, right? Allah bless you all, like a cow or a sheep or a lamb or a goat. Just these very docile creatures that they're just munching. They have no idea what's going on. Head down, eating, eat, drink, mate, die. That's it. He could be chewing on his way to the slaughterhouse. He has no idea. Just the herd effect. He says, everyone sort of has greed inside them. It's normal. It's fine on some level. But what happens when it exceeds its bounds, right? He says that's the first quality, that sort of becomes he says, and some people, because they gave in to their greed for so long, they never told themselves no, it actually, not evolves. What's the opposite of evolves? Regresses? They regress, or they mutate. That's a good word. They mutate. So then they start developing, they call them as-sifatu sabu'iyya, which are the qualities of predatorial animals. Like you slap a sheep, he keeps it moving. Minds his business. But then there's the predatorial animal. You see, if you don't rein in your greed, you become aggressive, right? You become aggressive. And so that's like, the lions and the tigers and the bears and the wolves and so on and so forth. That is why some people will show aggression, even in Ramadan. Shaitan doesn't need to be there. This has become part of their personality, right? And it's normal. It's normal because if you're fixated on this dunya, this world has finite resources. And so it lends itself to that dog-eat-dog mentality. It lends itself to the dog fight, right? The rat race and the dog fight. The scholars say, and if you're not careful, you can sort of mutate further to as-sifatu shaytaniyya. These are the satanic qualities. And those are the qualities of shaitan. Like, what comes to mind when you think of shaitan? Tell me quickly. What comes to mind? Shaitan is loving and caring and he's so sweet and he celebrates Valentine's Day. What's shaitan's qualities, guys? Yes, more than evil. Come on now. Huh? He's malicious. He's deceptive. He's envious. Like, think of the predators versus the shayateen. What's the difference? The predator basically is going to hurt you so he can have what you have. Shaitan wants to hurt you even though he knows he can't get it anyway, right? Shaitan is not like the animals, even the aggressive animals. They're not deceptive per se. They don't sit there for days and weeks thinking about how I'm going to tank you, right? How I'm going to make your life miserable, how I'm going to finish you off to a point of no. It is just like, inadvertent, sorry, do or die, and they fight, right? For the resource, whatever it may be, for their gains. But shaitan, no. Shaitan envies you and plots against you and scheme. So some people are like this. Some people envy and plot and scheme and have all that stuff. Even when shaitan's gone, they still have it. Why? Because they're that stained. May Allah forbid. So check yourself. What do I have? How polluted is my reservoir? But the scholar said shaitan does not stop there. There is one more pit beneath satanic qualities. And that's what shaitan really wants from you. Shaitan wants from you to be worse than him. Okay? I'm done. I'm finished. You're going down with me and I'm going to step on you in the hellfire. Right? That's what he wants. And this is what they call as-sifat al-malikiyya or as-sifat al-rabbaniyya. Basically, the God-like qualities or the king-like qualities. This is when a person, we have a word for it in English. It's called the God complex. What's the God complex? Help me, people, while I drink my coffee. What's the God complex? We're almost done. You've been very well behaved. What's the God complex? Come on, you guys all act like you never got your own PhDs on TikTok about what the God complex is. We all know what God complex is because we all accuse each other of it. So what's the God complex? Are you Googling? All four of them are evil. Come on now. Sisters, help me. I'm not throwing shade here, but when someone has a God complex. Huh? Like if you ask them, are you God? Can you hold your breath for 10 minutes? They're not going to say yes. Right? What does it mean to have a God complex? Should I throw a really controversial subject to wake everybody up? Sisters, does Andrew Tate have a God complex? I think he does. And I'm hopeful that Islam, inshallah, will cure him of it one day. Maybe I'm helping. And I can think of some, I don't know too many pop culture references, but I'm sure, there are easy, low-hanging fruit examples of women, celebrity, right, women that have God complex. What's a God complex? Okay, what's narcissism? Huh? Someone's almost like worshiping themselves. We should all have a degree of self-love, right? But this is more like self-worship. It's when people basically lay claims to qualities that only God should have. Is that clear? A crazy example, but sometimes extreme examples are just easier. And then we can walk it back to more common examples. I know, actually, he's not too far from your community, Dr. Hatim al-Hajj, many of you know him, he's a physician. He says he remembers hearing a plastic surgeon in the hospital come out of some corrective surgery procedure and say, A'udhu Billah, we fixed his mistake. Whose mistake? That's a beneath shaitan quality, right? To believe you've outdone God, right? Because if you think about it, shaitan, he wasn't confrontational with God. Like, yes, he rebelled, and in that sort of is implicit confrontation. But when Allah said to him, why didn't you prostrate to Adam? I told you to prostrate to Adam. Shaitan was almost changing the subject. But I'm better than him. He didn't say, I don't have to listen to you. He's trying to say, but I'm better than him. I'm not asking you about him. I'm asking you, why didn't you listen to me? Right? But when people believe that they should be speaking and everyone listening, and they should call the shots, and their opinions are the ultimate reference point, and they're absolutely perfect, this is the worst of the worst qualities. May Allah protect us. So Ramadan, to the extent of your share of it, fasting, to the extent of how committed to excellence you are in fasting, will determine how much of a rinse of these stains we get. May Allah rinse our hearts and yours, and protect us from any quality that would cause His wrath to befall us. Allahumma ameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakallahu khairan.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
حقا دائما أبدا لا إله إلا الله استووا واعتدلوا. Please make the line straight inshallah. الله أكبر الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله الله أكبر. الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
kind, Sheikh. I'm good. All right, let's get back to work, inshallah. If you're with us, come forward, come close. That is the sunnah. As close as you're comfortable being, of course, but come close, inshallah, so we can get back to our studies. Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. We begin in the name of Allah. All praise and glory be to Allah. And may His finest peace and blessings be upon His Messenger Muhammad and his family and his companions, every last one of them. So we began in the first leg of our journey today with speaking about the importance of understanding why we fast. And we, for those of you that may be just arriving, maybe you came for Salat al-Asr onward, we mentioned that we fast because Allah Azza wa Jal commanded us to fast and promised us that this will be a path to our taqwa, us developing consciousness of Allah and the innumerable, countless benefits we will get from that. So, in short, fasting helps restore the centrality of Allah in our life. He is the king and we are the servants of Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are honored because everyone is a servant of something. Everyone serves a purpose, and so we serve the greatest of all. We serve the Al-Akbar, right? The one who is the ultimate greatest, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we said of the benefits of fasting is that it is an exercise in self-restraint, and that developing patience and endurance and resilience and frustration tolerance and self-restraint and all related terms comes through practice, through exercising this muscle of ours. And we said thirdly that fasting helps us liberate our spirit from being forgotten or suppressed when we're overly focusing on our earthly or our worldly dimensions like our body. Of course, our brother made a great comment that we should always clarify that we never mean that we're supposed to be disregarding of our worldly existence, disregarding of our physical nature, because either extreme would be counterproductive. Either extreme would be unnatural and counterproductive. So even though we spent most of the time speaking about prioritizing the spirit and sort of forgetting the body a little bit, if you were to forget your worldly needs altogether, that would not just harm your body. You wouldn't just become physically weak and emotionally imbalanced if you're not getting married and finding sakina with marriage. And you wouldn't just have all these problems. Your spirit would suffer as well because you would not be whole. So Islam calls us to holistic well-being. That is the idea. Some people have this notion of like priesthood or monkship or celibacy or living in a monastery somewhere, isolating yourself from we are not isolationists, right? We are not hermits. That's not from our tradition. Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَرَهْبَانِيَّةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا مَا كَتَبْنَاهَا عَلَيْهِمْ. They invented this monkship. It was their creative way after Jesus, peace be upon him, to think they're getting closer to God. But God said, I never prescribed this for them because it's just unnatural. Unnatural like what? I'm only being half serious, okay? Unnatural like the keto diet. You know what happens with the keto diet? It's unnatural. No, like really. Think of hardcore dieting, right? Whatever you define hardcore as. Most people do what? They quit, then they go back to their old ways with a vengeance, right? It's like you're making salah qada and you go do eating qada. And you become twice as big or twice as unhealthy because it's just too aggressive of a move, right? And that is why it's not surprising that when you find people isolate themselves from society, I'm not going to get married, I'm not going to have kids, I'm going to be, you start discovering scandals and really perverted tendencies because it's unnatural. We're not created this way. Make sense? That's important. So our deen says the spirit is more important than the body, right? But take care of your body so that it can help you serve the spirit, right? Take care of society so it can encourage the right environment for spirit, for well-being, all of that. Like if someone were to say, listen, I don't want anything from this dunya. I don't want anything from this world. I just want Jannah. So, okay, you want Jannah? Just Jannah. Okay, what I need you to do is the following. I need you to get married and have kids so they can be righteous, so you can triple and quadruple and quintuple your levels in Jannah because their righteousness is yours, right? And I need you to get a job and get very wealthy so you can donate more money. And you're going to get higher in Jannah. And, right? It's all interconnected. Our deen came with the balanced, holistic, comprehensive approach. We should never forget that. Anyway, so that was an important disclaimer that I'm grateful that our brother prompted me to make so that no one ever leaves here thinking the Shaykh is crazy. No, forget the Shaykh, thinking that Islam is unnatural, right? One of the greatest reasons why Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world is people see that it matches so well with human nature. This is the religion for me. This is really from the God who knows me, who understands me, who created me. They recognize it. The naturalness of Islam is part of, the 5 greatest appeal factors of Islam. So taqwa, self-restraint, liberating the spirit from suppressing it by too much focus on the body. And then number 4 was developing empathy. Now, let's get to the fiqh of fasting in the sense of legal rulings. Let's keep this interactive. Who's obligated to fast in Islam? Okay. Who else wants to answer? He said sane Muslim adults are obligated to fast. Who agrees? Sane Muslim adult who can fast. Very good. Everybody agree? Anything else you guys want to say? What if I'm a sane Muslim adult who's capable of fasting, but I'm traveling? Must I fast? So let's add one more. Sane Muslim adult who's capable and resident. Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ. Whoever of you is present, meaning in their hometowns, resident, for this month, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ, then they must fast it. وَمَنْ كَانَ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ, and whoever is sick or traveling, فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ, then there are other days that they should identify to compensate, to substitute for them. Is that clear? So, what does it mean to be sane? I'm dead serious. What does it mean to be sane? How insane do I have to be to not have to fast? I don't mean that in the rhetorical sense. Yeah. If I cannot comprehend that Allah obligates me to fast, right, then I'm not obligated to fast. Because it's a spectrum, right? People that are mentally impaired are a spectrum. I have autistic friends who may have challenges in certain academic subjects, but they memorize the Quran and they can sort of blow you out the park in a conversation on fiqh and otherwise, right or wrong. That person is obligated to fast, right? So not every mental handicap per se is going to be, something that exempts you from fasting, right? Then we said healthy. So what kind of sick people are exempt from fasting? If you have diabetes, affects your life. But if it's only going to hospitalize me, I'm okay. Yes, sister, I'm sorry. All sick people. So if I have a headache, I can break my fast. Okay, now we're thinking. Let's go. Huh? If I need to take medication every day. That's what I mean. What is the need? Don't worry. I mean, this is something that our scholars have spent so much time on and thought about very clearly. I'm just working you through it to appreciate some of their demarcations, their definitions, right? So the majority, I don't want to get into the debate, the majority of scholars hold that if your body is in a condition that would be What'd you say? Be brave. Say it. If it will harm you to fast, right? If it will harm you to fast, or it will delay your recovery to fast, if the fasting affects your health in a negative way, right? In a significant negative way, right? You can pass out. You can bump your head. You can sort of, you're going to keep throwing up. All of these things, right? You're not going to be able to take your antibiotics if you need them, right? If there's significant harm happening to your body, okay? Too weak, too much damage, whatever it's going to cause. How do you know this? Because you have a doctor telling you this. Prefer to be a Muslim doctor, because you might run into a non-Muslim doctor who thinks that any sort of fasting is harmful, and just even if you're perfectly healthy and you're a CrossFit champ, and they'll be like, no, fasting, don't do that. And the studies aren't out yet really on the intermittent stuff, and there are people like this. But if you can find a Muslim doctor, you may want to consult with them, but not every single day and every single Ramadan. If you know of your body also that I cannot fast, then you're exempt from fasting, right? But we say consult with physicians for a number of reasons. Of them is that sometimes there are ways around this that may not sort of be on your radar, right? It could be a vitamin imbalance, that if you were to take your vitamin at suhoor, you'd be good for the rest of the day. You wouldn't have your shivers if you had your vitamin K, for instance. I'm speaking above my pay grade right now, so I'm going to stop with that. Just an example of why you should be consulting specialists and physicians on these issues. But in principle, though, just as a rule of thumb, if your sickness will be increased or your recovery will be delayed by your fasting, that's the type of sickness that gets you exempted from fasting. Make sense? Good. Because not every sickness affects the fast. And then the traveler. When is the traveler allowed to allowed to not fast? Huh? When's the traveler not obligated to fast? More than 80 kilos, you mean? 50 miles, okay. What if it's easy? What if it's a walk in the park? What if there's no hardship involved in my travel whatsoever? Do I have to still fast? Okay. Any sisters want to add anything? Time difference. So remind me to come back to that point. But the idea is that hardship is not a non-factor here. It's not about whether it's a hardship or not. Okay? The permissibility to break your fast is because you're traveling, not because there's a hardship in traveling. Okay? They're separate issues. They're separate issues. And so if you consider yourself traveling, according to the four madhabs, the four major schools of Islamic law, if you're leaving town for a journey of 50 miles or more, 48, 50 miles, 80 kilometers basically, so say 50 miles, and you're leaving town, then as soon as you leave town, you're considered a traveler. You are allowed to break your fast. Okay? All four madhabs agree on this. What they disagree on is that in Ramadan, when you travel in Ramadan, is it better to break your fast or better to just gut it out and fast? They disagree on this. Those who say it's better to fast, they sort of emphasize the ayat and ahadith that speak about the specialness of Ramadan. It's not like any other fast, like it's a special season, right? And those who say it is better to break your fast, they focus or they cite the ahadith that speak about Allah loving that you accept His rukhas, accept His concessions. That Allah gave you a license to break your fast, you should accept Allah's charities. You should accept and appreciate Allah's sort of flexibility, and that is more beloved to Allah, they said. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, the great Khalifa and scholar, he was a scholar, he has a middle opinion on this that I like to share with people. Why I like to share it with people? Because they all essentially agree that you're allowed to break your fast, okay? So all we're really talking about here is what's better. And so there's no harm really, right? But he says, أفضلهما أيسرهما. That the better option, should I fast in my trip or not fast in my trip? He said the better of the two is the easier of the two. And that varies from one trip to another, from one situation to another, from one person to another. It's a little bit subjective. Like, I know that if I don't fast, it's going to be so much harder on me to make up these fasts after Ramadan when nobody's fasting. But me knowing that this is the month where they're all fasting, it's just going to be easier on me to fast. Okay, then fast. Don't put yourself through the hardship of being the only dude fasting in your family when they pull out the cheesecake, right? Yeah, okay. And if it's easier on you to break your fast because you're traveling, it's a long journey and you're skipping time zones and whatnot. You know, I'm taking a flight from the East Coast to California. I'm going to have 3 extra hours of fasting. Now I'm breaking it, right? But on the flip side, sister, if on my way back from the trip, I'm leaving California and I'm coming to New York, what am I going to do? No, you're not. You're not breaking your fast on their time. You're breaking your fast wherever you are, but at the time of Maghrib, whenever sun goes down. But the idea is you probably want to fast because you're going to break your fast that day 3 hours early, right? Because 9 a.m. over there is noon here, and then, 6 p.m. over there is 9 p.m. over here. So you'll fast 3 less hours that day. So I'm just giving it as an example. You don't have to listen to me. Do what you want. But the point is, there are times when it's easier to break your fast, times when it's not. It's up to you. Knock yourself out. Okay? But the reason he said this, I just wanted to point out, I'll come to you in a second. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, I just want to show you where he got this from. He said, because when Allah said, if you're traveling, then make it up for another number of days, He didn't leave it there, but He gave you the reason. He said, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ. Allah wants to make your life easier. He said, so if the point behind allowing you to break your fasting journey is to make it easier, then that is the biggest factor you focus on. What is easier? So it's a nice, latifa jamila that Umar Aziz noticed, or istanbataha, derived it from that ayah. Yes, Shaykh.
Sometimes travel can be like a gray area where it's not like you really have to go. So, and especially if you subscribe to the opinion that you should take Allah's concession, should we try to push back and avoid travel in the first place in Ramadan, or even to the extreme, like to maximum effort to just not travel at all in the first place? Is that something we should attempt to do?
There's no cookie cutter answer because there has to be a calculation and a weighing of pros and cons, right? Like, what if canceling this trip is going to, I don't know, put me under someone's eye for the next round of layoffs?
Okay.
The next guy is more committed. I know it's a horrible way to think sometimes, but there are factors there, right? This is actually, do I want to say this? No, I don't want to say this example because it's misused a lot. But the scholars, when they spoke about it, because there's a difference in what you can say sort of like as a blanket rule, and then everyone goes home and thinks they understood it, versus something that should be on a case-by-case basis. And that's the difference between a hukm, a rule in principle, and a fatwa, which is a customized answer for your particular circumstance. And so there are great examples of more leniency than you would expect from the most qualified scholars on when you can actually break your fast for travel. Simply put, without getting into the details and giving people too much wiggle room, they essentially identified that so long as it's not a trip that is sinful, any legitimate, any permissible, not necessary, permissible trip warrants the concession. So if I'm going to, what is it called? Atlantic City, New Jersey, to give da'wah, of course. No, if you're going to gamble, right, then no. Then you wouldn't be allowed the concession. Obviously not. There's a masjid in Atlantic City, Sheikh. Come on now. لكل امرئ ما. Exactly. So if the intention behind the journey is to go do something haram, then you don't get the concession. Because how would the Sharia be lenient with you while you're doing haram? How does that make sense? You know, that's almost like someone going on a journey that's like 35 miles and he takes the long route to make it 50 miles so he can break his fast. No, absolutely not. You know, how can the Sharia give room to that? So we said sick if it's going to be affected by the fast. We said traveler, even if there's no hardships and sort of the room for what's easier and harder. We said the mentally handicapped or challenged, if they cannot comprehend their accountability, their liability to fast. We said adult saying Muslim. Remember we said adult? So does that mean a child doesn't have to fast? We got that. You got to be an adult to be required to fast. But is a child allowed to fast? That's a good one. Allowed to fast. Okay. If the child is allowed to fast, should the child fast? Huh? Wait. She's saying something potentially intelligent. I'm joking. Go ahead. Huh? Well, of course, adult or child, if they can't handle it, they're not going to fast. But let's imagine they can handle it. Should they fast? They're not required. We're done with required. Should they? It is optional. So should is different than must. But optional, should parents prompt their kids, encourage their kids to fast? Absolutely. It would be a disservice. It would be unintended cruelty to your children to wait till they're 13 or 15 years old and say, by the way, salah, hijab, fasting, it's cruel, right? And so accustoming them, easing this on, wallahi, children would surprise you. I know parents without any sort of pressure, sort of incentivized, positive reinforcement. Their kids have been fasting the full day since they were 5 years old. And my kids, bifadlillah, saw them and were jealous of them, of all the sort of the hype that their parents put around them. My kids since 6 have been fasting because of those 5-year-olds. They may have skipped a few days, but so what? If your child at 5, 6 years old is fasting 25, 30 days, somewhere there, then they will not give up fasting, inshallah, right? They're not going to feel like it's the end of the world, you know? When the day gets a little longer, a little shorter, the co-workers here, or like a good dinner there, that's it. This is what I do, right? And so you should. The kids should. In fact, Al-Rubayy' bint Muawwidh, radiallahu anha, she narrates, this is in Sahih al-Bukhari, that in the month of Muharram, you know the sacred month of Muharram, it is very rewardable to fast. The Prophet ﷺ on the 10th day of Muharram sent a message to their neighborhood in Medina and said to them, we are fasting today, whoever is fasting, because the Jews used to also do it, so there was some like confusion, should we? Yes, continue fasting, I too am fasting. The narrator says, so since that day we used to keep that fast, the 10th of Muharram, Yom Ashura, وَنُصَوِّمُ الصِّبْيَانِ, and we would make our children fast, and when they would cry, obviously they're not starving. Cry means like getting just, what's the word? Whiny, getting whiny. We would give them a cotton toy, a doll basically, and send them to the masjid. We would distract them until Maghrib. That's good parenting. That's righteous parenting. That's how you build what we spoke about earlier, frustration tolerance. That's how you build resilient children. So that when life happens and people fall apart, they don't, right? May Allah protect our kids and yours. So we should look for the first opportunities, even if it's gradual, to get them to fast. Now, when we do that, obviously we will be rewarded as parents. Will the kid be rewarded? Who says they'll be rewarded? هل يؤجرون الأطفال على صيامهم? Who says they will get reward? Who says they will not get reward? Only their parents get the reward. Why are you laughing at me? I'm serious. It's just a vote. It's a WhatsApp poll. You guys laugh at WhatsApp polls? Huh? So, Now this guy is going to be contrarian and start a controversy. What do you do with the hadith that says the pen has been lifted in the case of three people? The insane person until he regains his sanity, the sleeping person until he awakens, and the child until they pass puberty. The hadith says the pen has been lifted. So why are you saying they get reward? Be confident, people. I agree with you. They're going to be rewarded. No, that's something else. That's Allah's knowledge, right? So you're saying it like from your rationale is they're exerting an effort, so they should be. It's only fair that they get a reward. But this is like Allah's scales of justice are obviously going to be beyond us. So we only know what the Prophet said, what Allah said. The Prophet said the pen is lifted. So the only thing that could sort of give us a way around this is if the Prophet also said something else, right? Or Allah said something else. Because we're not really going to one-up Allah Azza wa Jalla on His logic. If that's the rule, and He knows best why that's the rule. But it's not the rule. Because in Sahih al-Bukhari, or Muslim or both, I don't recall. No, in Sahih al-Bukhari, when the woman came to the Prophet ﷺ, no, this may be the hadith of Jabir in Sahih Muslim. Anyway, it's the famous hadith of Hajj. It's most likely in Sahih Muslim. Jabir records the Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ from beginning to end, from he left Medina till he came back. One of the longest authentic hadith in the Sunnah. So he mentions that when he got on his camel, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a woman came to him and lifted up a child to him. Okay, and she said, "Alihadha Hajj? Can this person make Hajj? Alihadha, is there Hajj? Meaning, is a Hajj counted for this person?" So he said, "Na'am wa laki ajr." He said, yes, their Hajj counts, and you too will get a reward. So because of that hadith, that the child will get the reward for Hajj, okay, they took the hadith of the pen has been lifted and they said this must mean the pen of sins has been lifted. The pen of accountability, not the pen of reward. So the child gets a head start. The same way the convert gets the head start. And the same way, inshallah, with tawbah, all of us have an opportunity to clean our sheets. But essentially the child, so long as they understand enough to make an intention, right? It's voluntary. Like the child is not being forced away from food. No, they know what they're doing, that they're deliberately choosing to not eat for Allah, then they will be rewarded. They're deliberately praying, right? They're not just tied to me in the carrier and they're on my back. No, that wouldn't be reward. But if they know what they're doing, they'll be rewarded. That's the idea with the reward of children. Any question on this? No, that's a great example. I mean, imagine the amount of ajr involved in a kid. They usually do most of the memorization when they're a clean slate as children, right? All that ajr is not there. It is there. Not because we believe it should be there, we do, but because the Prophet ﷺ told us that it would count. Right? Okay, so now, who are those that are incapable of fasting? Or exempt due to being incapable of fasting? There are those that Allah considered them incapable. So the scholars call these like legally incapable of fasting. Who are those legally incapable of fasting? Yes. So the nursing can fast if she's able to. So the menstruating and the postpartum, the woman that is menstruating during her menstrual cycle, or she has just delivered the child and she is still in that postpartum phase. This person is not to fast. They cannot fast. Legally, they cannot fast. Huh? Can a woman take medication? I'll repeat the question. Can a woman take medication that would inhibit her cycle so that she can fast the 30 days? As far as I understand, these medications always risk adverse effects, such as hormone imbalance and otherwise. So that adds a second reason for us not to do that. This is a common question also in Hajj and Umrah and stuff, right? And so this is the natural process, and we need not feel sort of guilty or ashamed or bothered by this. We get the reward with being content with Allah's qadar, right? There are people that can't fast the entire month, right? Every single year. People that have like advanced diabetes, for instance, and otherwise, right? And so this is the qadar of Allah. We get rewarded great rewards for accepting it and being content with it, and avoiding what we may like more, especially when what we may like more may be displeasing to Allah. I'm referring to the bodily harm or the sort of the chemical harm that could occur to a woman's body by taking these medications, and Allah knows best. Does someone want to follow up on this? There's an important, point we want to make here for our sisters and for our brothers who are obligated to carry this back to their sisters as well, is that what we mean by menses or postpartum is the visibility of the menstrual blood. That's very important, because if you assume that the cycle has began because of your schedule may change. If you assume it began because you're beginning to feel the tightness or the cramp or otherwise, that is not the menses, right? It is the visibility of the menstrual blood. When the flow is actually externally visible, that is when menstruation is demarcated in the Sharia. And then, so those are those legally incapable. Then those physically incapable, meaning what? The sick. And now I want to take a little bit of a deep dive into those who are sick. Those who are sick, there's temporary and there's permanent sickness, right? Chronic sickness. Or just chronic weakness. Chronic weakness is basically in the same category as sickness. When you get to a certain age where you can't fast anymore, right? And so how do you deal with this? When a person is sick, some sickness, some debilitation is stopping them from fasting, the first question you want to say is this chronic or not? Or is it temporary? Because if it's temporary, what are you going to do? Come on, stay awake with me, people. Bismillah. Yeah, it's clear. The Quran is explicit on this. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. You make it up on other days. Okay? You make it up whenever possible. And according to the majority of scholars, whenever possible should be before the following Ramadan. The Hanafis say, no, you can make it up whenever. But even if you're Hanafi, you shouldn't disagree with the sooner the better, because you don't know what tomorrow brings, right? And so we can't obligate you on the Hanafi view to do it before next Ramadan, but we can still recommend for you to err on the side of caution and to be as early as possible. So let's say I'm an elderly person, I can no longer fast, the fasting is just too long of a day for me. So I would wait until the days are shorter and make it up in those days. If I know that the shortest days of the year still is a no-go for me, even the 4:30 Maghrib is still too long of a day for me, then I stop making it up. That's when I consider myself chronically ill, right, or perpetually ill. And in that case, you feed one poor person for every day you cannot fast. You know the great Sahabi, Anas ibn Malik, radiallahu an, he was blessed by Allah with a long life and a big family. By the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, he asked Allah to give him a long life and give him many children and much wealth. And Allah gave him all of that. Like he says, between my children and my grandchildren, they have exceeded 100 in number. Allah bless him. Many righteous people from his descendants. No idea how he remembered all their names, or if he did. But he also lived to be over 100 years old. So Allah blessed him in his lifespan. But in the later years of his life, he could no longer fast and couldn't even make up the fast. And so what he used to do, radiallahu an, may Allah be pleased with him, is on the last day of Ramadan, he would invite 30 needy people to his house and feed them all a hot meal. And he's done with his Ramadan like everybody else before Eid Salah. May Allah be pleased with him. You had a question, Shaykh?
Yeah, there's a question online.
Okay.
What if someone has kidney stone and they fast?
I don't know. What does fasting do with kidney stones? You need a lot of water, right? Something like that? So the rule, don't take my words, it's dependent, contingent upon their condition. What sort of harm is going to happen from fasting? I'm imagining that they need to take sort of medication to dissolve it, and they need to take water. I don't know if that's like once a day medication or is it like every 12 hours. So all of those things are contingent. But after all that is figured out, we're going to say if it's fasting or the treatment, then the treatment. Because kidney stones are curable. Kidney stones can become extremely painful. Kidney stones can cause a lot of damage there and around there. So it's a no-brainer. It would be enough if you can't work around it, then to pick recovery from here over fasting now. That's the sort of the hypothetical. Yes, ma'am. There's nothing I can say that can overturn what these great scholars have said. The opinion that I follow, because it is the opinion that I was taught as strongest, even though I am a student of the Hanbali madhab, that the Hanafi position, which holds that the maximum number of days for the menstrual cycle being 10, seems to be the stronger opinion, and it is also the most aligned with modern medical observation. That after the 10th day, any bleeding after that is irregularity. It's irregular bleeding. It is not sort of the flushing of the womb's preparation for a potential baby. It's not that. That's what menstruation is, right? The lining of that's not what it is. That takes 10 days max to clear. Anything beyond that wouldn't be menstruation. So the opinion that I hold is that if it goes beyond 10 days, then they are to start. I know this sounds confusing, but they are to consider themselves done with their cycle at 7. So 3 days, to retroactively consider that 3 of those days need makeup in terms of prayer. Of course, fasting, all 10 will be needed. You need to make up all 10 for fasting. Does that make sense? So the menstrual cycle, on average, is like 6 to 7, maybe 8 days, right? So many scholars hold it to be 7. Hold it at 7, right? And then the outermost brink would be 10. But if we are passing 10, then this wasn't menses. And so how do I know which of that 10 was actually my menses? You go back to 7. Does that make sense? If it stops at 8 or 9 or 10, then it was menses. If it exceeds 10, then okay, my menses ended at some point earlier and this is irregular bleeding, so just choose 7. All right? And Allah knows best. Yes, ma'am. You err on the side of caution always. That time it's required. Meaning in counting, I don't mean when you actually do it. When you're counting, is it 3 or 4 rakahs? You have to say 3. Because you know you're obligated with 4 rakahs. And you only know that you've done 3. You're doubtful about 4. So the default is what? I owe 4 rakahs. So I can't be unsure of whether I offered them or not. So I only base it on the lesser, right? Because the default is I'm in the negative. Yeah? So I only can count those I've confirmed of what I owe, right? That's the way it works, always. With obligations, think of it that way. Certainty overrules doubt. You know, unless I'm certain that I've cleared a certain obligation, then I can't give in to doubt. Is that clear? Last question for now. I just want to get through one more stretch of this, and then we'll open again for questions. Yeah. No, because that's voluntary and that's obligatory, right? And so that's like saying, I'm going to pray 4 rakahs right now for the 4 before dhuhr and dhuhr. That'd be really clever, but it's not going to work. But, you know, to combine like a voluntary with a voluntary, is going to pray 2 rakahs of dhuhr with my istikhara or my tahiyyatul masjid or something, that works. But when you're going obligatory and voluntary, yeah. Okay, so if sickness, chronic, you're never going to be able to make it up, you feed one poor person. either a kilogram, a sa', or a kilogram of staple food, like dates or wheat or something, right? Or you feed them a hot meal. Of course, if you don't have enough needy around you, or if you can't feed one needy person for 30 days, just go to Islamic Relief or Helping Hands or Zakat Foundation. They have kafara, fidya buttons, and then you'll make sure that you don't give it out in money, give it out in food, right? You can give someone money to give it out in food. They're your agent. They represent you. They're doing this on your behalf, but it should not be given to the recipient in the form of money. It should be in the form of food. That's important. I'm sorry for you probably all know this, but Muslims sometimes just like to do everything, like this, right? Zakatul mal, you pay your zakat on money. In money, no, we want to give out food. This is supposed to be given out in food for your fast. No, I want to give it out in money. It's just like, this sounds a lot like what Banu Israel used to do, right? Like cow. We say left, you say right. This should be distributed as stated by the Sharia, not by whatever our whims sort of suggest to us on that day, depending on, our opinion or how much indigestion we have or something. Okay, pregnant and nursing. Many women. When you're pregnant or you're nursing, that weakens your body, right or wrong? Okay. You should not say yes, men. You guys have no idea. Or so we're told, right? I'll stop being funny or trying to be funny. What a woman that has to break her fast when she's pregnant or nursing, what does she have to do? By the way, same rule. This is someone physically incapable. That means the doctor told them, this is dangerous for you, dangerous for your baby, not enough hydration, or they see that their milk is cut off, they're not producing, they're not lactating for their baby, that sort of thing, right? So what do you do if you have to break your fast due to pregnancy or nursing? Just like the sick person, you make it up when possible. And then if too many years have piled on, there is an opinion outside the four madhabs. But it is like a strong opinion. It's mentioned by Ibn Abbas and Ibn Umar, two great companions, that you don't have to make it up anymore, and you just pay fidya, or feed, for every day you couldn't fast due to pregnancy or nursing. And this seems, subhanAllah, to be very merciful and also make a lot of sense, because it's not exactly like sickness, right? Sickness, most of the time, for most people, is temporary. But with pregnancy and nursing, can you imagine a woman is pregnant this Ramadan, and then she nurses for 2 years. Those are 3 Ramadans. She owes 90 days plus that year's Ramadan, so that's what, 120 days, if she's not pregnant again. All right, and then, that happens, and so you owe a year of fasting or something, and it just may be absolutely unbearable for some people. In that case, it could be just fidya. Some scholars, and this is the opinion of the Hanbali madhab, by the way, they differentiate a little bit. Ask your local sheikh. But in general, that if a woman is pregnant and due to her health reasons, she's needing to break her fast, same as everything we said, she just makes up the fast. But if she breaks her fast because her baby needs more milk, then she makes up the fast and pays the fidya. Why'd they say that? A lot of reasons, but if you just want the logic of it, is that you were not required or forced to break your fast. You could have paid someone to breastfeed your child. Or in this day and age, we can say, we can buy some formula, right? And so the Sharia is being lenient at saying, but you know what? We're not going to insist that you do that. Have another woman nurse and pay her, or go out and buy some formula and pay for that. You can break your fast and make it up for yourself and pay for the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal allowed you that option, even though you were not physically hurting. It was just for your child. You get it? So that's the sort of the Hanbali position and the Shafi'i position as well. Yeah. So if the woman that broke her fast due to her own weakness, or due to, her need to produce more milk for her child, and this sort of piles on, then we can consider her less like the sick person that just needs to make stuff up, and more like the chronically sick person that can't make up anymore. Because you know it's in the middle, right? It's not unlimited amount of days. It's I'll never be able to make it up, but it is also 300 days, right? So it's like that middle category. So the scholar said, do we consider a sick person and say, make it up whenever you can, keep working, keep working, keep working? Or do we say, okay, you can quit now and just pay? Like the person who is aged and it's unlikely they'll ever get their strength back. This is the elderly, right? Because they're only getting older. Likewise, the number when it gets so big, it's pretty likely it's going to be outside of your ability to fast. Does that make sense? Works? Good. Most important part, guys. What breaks the fast? Huh? Food and drink. Right or wrong? And, wait, and whatever serves the function of food and drink. Like what? Yeah. So people always ask about injections. Does the injection break my fast or not? The needle break my fast or not? We say if it's a nutritional needle, it's going to break your fast. You know why, right? Because I could put an IV glucose sugar drip in my arm, and what's going to happen? I'm going to faint and stuff, but after that, what's going to happen? I'm not going to faint. I got to keep you on your toes. You're all falling asleep, so I have to sort of... what's going to happen? I'm going to be able to fast all of Ramadan without a bite of food, right? It's cheating. Not cheating, but you get me, right? It served the function of food, right? And even some scholars would also include like blood dialysis. If you need to have sort of your blood cleared, your food, you know, creates blood, guys, right? Replenishes your blood, carries nutrients to your body and all of that. So if you're getting a fresh round of blood, like a blood transfusion or blood dialysis or these sorts of things, they would say make up those days later, right? But when you're injecting your body with something that's not nutritional, like what? Astaghfirullah, you can't say the word vaccine in the masjid, akhi. It starts fights before Ramadan. Yeah, like anything medicinal, any medicine. Anesthetic, nope. Vaccine, nope. Painkiller, nope, right? Any medicine injection, right? Insulin, no, right? Any medicine injection will not break your fast. Because you can't, it doesn't sustain you, it's not nourishing. So it cannot be compared with food and drink. There's a nice cool exception here. Remember I told you, if it's haram, you don't get any leeway? Smoking. Why did they say smoking breaks the fast? They said because you're ingesting something like food and drink that is haram, so we're going to treat it like food and drink. Smoking breaks your fast. Right? Giving blood, controversial, so you should just do it after Maghrib or after Ramadan. There's no reason for us, you know, to create an artificial challenge here, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ in one hadith said, أفطر الحاجم والمحجوم, that the person that does blood cupping and the person to whom blood cupping is done, so the guy doing it and the guy getting it done, you guys know blood cupping, it's becoming famous nowadays, right? Some people do it dry, some people actually let out some of the blood, and they believe that's even better and more effective. That those two people have their fast broken. Some scholars believe that rule still stands. Other scholars believe that this was a rule in the earliest years of fasting because people aren't used to fasting, and so anything that would weaken the person, they were prohibited from doing it, right? And so some believe that rule was abrogated because there's a hadith that mentions the Prophet ﷺ had hijama done while he was fasting, right? And so how do you reconcile between those two reports? Some considered it an earlier rule, but some considered it no. It's an ongoing rule for everybody. And so letting go of significant amounts of blood is equivalent to the sort of blood cupping health procedure. Interestingly though, scholars did not consider blood tests to break your fast because they said it's an insignificant amount compared to a blood donation. It doesn't compare. There's no chance of weakness from a blood test really, no significant chance, no substantial, you know, incidence of weakness. As opposed to blood transfusions, yeah, people sometimes need a little bit of sugar after, they need some orange juice and that sort of stuff when they donate blood. So blood tests wouldn't break your fast. And of course, if blood tests don't break your fast, then even less bleeding, don't bother the sheikh and ask them if they break the fast. They don't break the fast. If you go to the dentist, and a little bit of bleeding, or, you get a paper cut, don't run to the masjid and say, Sheikh, what do I do? Please, the sheikh got a lot of stuff on his hands. He's busy. People get married, people getting divorced, people coming into Islam, people leaving Islam. He's busy, okay? So that's with regards to food and drink. And there's so many ancillary subjects, like basically anything you ingest deliberately will break your fast. Even if it's not necessarily nutritional, but if it's going down this path, it's going to break your fast, unless it's accidental. Because the Prophet ﷺ even said, وَبَالِغْ فِي الْإِسْتِنْشَاقِ إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ صَائِمًا. Be thorough in your wudu and be thorough when you're irrigating your nose. But listen, he said, unless you're fasting. Why unless you're fasting? Because if you're not careful, it'll come down, it'll drip. And then it might get swallowed. And so that taught us that anything that is swallowed, if you're careless or deliberately swallowing anything, that would break your fast. Pure accident, you're fine, right? Something gets loose in your mouth, you accidentally, this happens a lot at Fajr, right? Pure accident, fine. Otherwise, you got to be careful. So food, drink, anything ingested really, and injections if they serve a nutritious purpose. You guys got that? That's category 1. What'd you say? Yeah. Dr. Hatim al-Hajj says that inhalers don't break the fast. So you can just follow his opinion on that. And Allah knows best. Sublingual tablets as well, because they're not really swallowed, they're absorbed by the membrane of your mouth, really. They're sublingual, means the ones you put under your tongue, they just get absorbed in the mouth. You're not really swallowing that, even if some insignificant amount may trail back there. Okay, so food and drink and anything that serves that function. Also, marital relations, actual marital relations, would break the fast. If you guys want specific details, ask me later, because we do have a mixed crowd. But let me be a little bit vague, but a little bit clear, because this is important. A person that pleases themselves, self-pleasure in that sense, right? This would break the fast if sort of a climax occurs, if an ejaculation occurs, if the orgasm occurs, because the Prophet ﷺ said fasting will come on the Day of Judgment and say, fasting itself, Allah will cause it to materialize on the Day of Judgment and say, مَنَعْتُهُ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ وَشَهْوَتَهُ فَشَفِّعْنِي فِيهِ. I prevented him from his food and his drink and his sexual desires, so allow me to save him from the punishment today. So if a person that gets involved in that self-pleasure, right, then they're not being deprived of that, right? The sexual desire is being satisfied, not being restrained. And so that would break the fast, of course. And I just want to pause real quick and just speak about how serious it is, to be casual about not fasting. Because we are told in our Sharia that a person that is careless about when to break the fast has a severe penalty, right? So what about not fasting altogether? There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ was shown some beautiful sights from the hereafter and also some horrific scenes from the hereafter. And one of those scenes in that hadith, it's famous, authentic hadith of Samura radiallahu anh, Ibn Jundab, he said that I was brought to a man or men mu'allaqina bi'araqibihim, that are being hung upside down by their calves, basically. You ever seen an animal when they're slaughtered and they're hung upside down by those hooks that are just right under the joint? Seen that? He said, I saw human beings hung upside down like this. مُشَقَّقَةً أَشْدَاقُهُمْ, with their mouths, their cheeks ripped open to the back. تَسِيلُ أَشْدَاقُهُمْ دَمًا, and this profusely bleeding as they're hanging upside down. It's draining from here. And I said, O Jibreel, O Mikael, who are these people? What has gotten them to go through this? He says, هؤلاء الذين يفطرون قبل تحلة صومهم. These are the people who break their fast before it is time to do so. These are those who break their fast before it is time to do so. And so we should not take this matter lightly. The last thing is, inducing vomit will break your fast. Vomiting will not break your fast. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ ذَرَعَهُ الْقَيْءُ فَلَا قَضَاءَ عَلَيْهِ وَمَنْ اسْتَقَاءَ عَمْدًا فَلْيَقْضِ. Whoever is like overtaken by vomit, like the vomit just forces itself out, there is no makeup for that person. They're good. You're fine. وَمَنْ اسْتَقَاءَ عَمْدًا. Whoever induces vomit, عَمْدًا, deliberately, فَلْيَقْضِ. This person must make up their fast. Okay? So that's an important factor here. Any questions on this stuff? Huh? The brother is asking, when a person deliberately breaks the fast, how do they make this up? They make it up by fasting another day and sincerely repenting to Allah Azza wa Jal subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, that sounds very simple. And in a sense, Allah Azza wa Jal's mercy is very wide for everything. But it should not take away from the gravity of that crime, of breaking the fast without an excuse, the fact that, oh, just make up another day, right? The simplicity does not mean it's a simple issue. Because some people think, okay, what do I have to do to make up for it? Is there a particular kafara, like a particular amount to pay or a particular thing to do, right? In addition, that's not, the scholar said that, you know, some crimes are so big that there is no kafara for them. Like all you can do is replace it with an equal one and make tawbah and just wait till the day of judgment to see if you were sincere. Like that's very daunting. And they use the example of the broken oath. You know, when you break an oath in Islam, what do? Huh? You fast for 3 days. No, that's not what you do. Sorry. No, it's not. Yeah, so there are 3 types of oaths, ayman, right, in the Quran, right? And this is, I'm lengthening this on purpose because it is the comparison I want you to make. There is the first category, it's called aymanul laghu. لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم. Allah will not call you to account to sort of the unintended oaths you make. When you use God's name, you shouldn't do this a lot, but when it just, you know, you say it, you don't actually mean there's a binding contract and contingency that's sacred and because I put Allah's name on it. You don't mean that, right? You just say, no, wallahi, please eat. Wallahi, you're going to eat. Wallahi, you're going to stay over. That sort of thing, right? You're just trying to sort of really be emphatic in your generosity. If the person doesn't eat, you're good. In general, right? If you didn't clearly intend this as a contractual thing between you and Allah. The second type of ayman is the contractual ayman, when you intend that if this happens, that will happen. If this doesn't happen, that will happen, right? And so these are called aymanul uqud. I swear to you, I will come tomorrow, right? And you intend by that, you know, this is a solemn promise. Those are the ones that if you did not fulfill them, you have to pay a kafara. And the Quran says that kafara, that expiation, that atonement is to free a slave. No slaves today. Then you must feed 10 people an average meal that you would feed to your own families, the ayah says, or clothe them, or clothe 10 people with sort of average garments that you would feed or clothe your family with. And if, and this is why I said no, sister, it's not really sort of like a variety option. If you cannot, then fast 3. You're not allowed to fast 3 days unless you've not been capable of feeding. But all of this is just a discussion on atonement, kafara. There is a third type of yameen that has no kafara. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ called aymanul ghamus. It's when you swear by Allah's name while knowing that you're lying. You intend to not fulfill it, or something it's past and wallahi it didn't happen when in reality it did happen, that sort of thing, right? That one, interestingly, there's no kafara for it. There's no atonement for it. So what do? You make tawbah, you try to make up for it, but there's no quantifiable, measurable, penalty. And they said this is of the signs that it is the greatest of them. And they said it was called ghamus, it's called the dipping oath. They said it was called al-ghamus, the dipping oath, because it is what dips people into the fire. It plunges people into the fire, right? And so just because, we say if this person is going to make up the day, this person is going to fidya and that, don't measure it like, oh, if I deliberately broke my fast, all I have to do is make up the day. Obviously, I don't mean this for our brother. I mean this for all listeners and watchers, right? This is a grave matter. Fasting is one of the pillars of Islam. It is the greatest acts of our deen after salah, right? It is on the level of, zakah and siyam and hajj. It is no light matter to downplay that. Any other questions? Go ahead, Shaykh.
I have a question about when we were talking about the fidya and also about the women and their cycles. So for example, if my wife, she wasn't able to fast for 7 days, right? But before the next Ramadan comes in, she has to fast for it. But if she doesn't fast, and we're in Sha'ban, and we're setting the mood for Ramadan, should she give fidya, or should she still be fasting for those days that she missed?
If we're going with the majority view, then it's a debt on her that has passed its deadline. The makeup deadline has been neglected. If it's been neglected, it doesn't mean the debt is gone by being delinquent. It means just seek forgiveness, and after Ramadan's over, get back to it.
Okay. But then, as you mentioned about like the days piling up for those like the pregnant and breastfeeding women, so that's like a different category also?
Yeah, then she has not yet been obligated to make them up if she can't, right? Because the obligation is always suspended when inability is present.
So for that one that we're talking about the pregnant and breastfeeding, it has to be about like 2 years or 3 years of fasts, and then she can just give the fidya?
If it piles on and she can't do it.
Okay.
So she should ask her local scholar on.
So first, like the first method is always fast and try to make up, and if it doesn't happen, it piles up, then just give the fidya later on.
Yes, that is the method if you're breaking your fast for your own health.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're breaking your fast to feed your child for lactation purposes, then according to the opinion I shared, this is not agreed upon, the Shafi'i view and the Hanbali view I shared is that she's not only going to make up, but she's also going to pay fidya. And yes, the generous husband, if he's able, is allowed to do this on her behalf. You're allowed to. Yes, sister. He was asking what happens if the year passes, Ramadan starting, and she still hasn't made up. We tell him make them up after the following Ramadan. We're not saying it's right. According to the majority of scholars, it's not right that she wait this long. But that doesn't mean, khalas, time's over, not going to make up anymore. She still has to make them up, even though she is negligent, if she was negligent for waiting a whole year and not doing it. That's the idea. Yes?
So for the involuntary food and drink.
Involuntary food and drink, yes.
So for example, in Ramadan, we woke up in the morning and forgot we were fasting and took like a sip of water.
Yeah.
Immediately remembered, but you'd already swallowed. In that kind of situation, should we make up the fast, or is we just continue?
According to the majority of scholars, the hadith applies. إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَجَاوَزَ لِي عَنْ أُمَّتِي فِي الْخَطَأِ وَالنِّسْيَانِ وَاسْتُكْرِهُ عَلَيْهِ. Allah has pardoned for me my ummah's, my nation's forgetfulness and accidents and what they were forced into doing. So whatever you accidentally did, you didn't know was wrong. You're not someone who doesn't care. You tried to know, but you didn't know. I need to qualify. And then you forgot, and Allah knows you forgot. Or you had a gun to your head, and they told you eat. Then those are all according to just, the Malikis don't believe that forgetfulness will absolve you, but the majority does.
So you don't have to make that up.
You don't have to make it up according to the majority of scholars. Back to the sisters. Let me just make sure. Did I miss anybody that had their hand up or who hasn't asked yet? No? Go ahead. Yes. It's 1 fidya per day missed. All right? She was asking how much fidya. It's one fidya, which is a saw of staple food, or a sort of an average meal per day that you could not fast. Any other questions? So I'll bounce back and forth. Go ahead, Akhi.
So regarding the forgetfulness, like I have a great grandfather who's 90 years old.
MashaAllah.
And he has dementia.
MashaAllah.
So like he forgets that he prayed, he forgets, about fasting. So like how would we be able to like reconcile and like tell him that okay,
Leave him be.
so he doesn't have to fast then?
Yeah. The brother is asking about someone who has dementia. Their mental capacity, their memory is deteriorating, and they're disoriented and the likes. Should we sort of help them fast? They're probably beyond, they've passed the curve. May Allah accept from them their lifetime of good deeds, and that's it.
Like what about their salah? Like because sometimes he says that, he doesn't even remember that he did pray, but he forgot. So is that also
Just ease his path. If he wants to pray again, let him pray again. If he tells you, help me make wudu again, help him make wudu again. Gently remind him he prayed if he hasn't. If he doesn't want to listen, he doesn't have to listen. Let him pray. No harm. Yes, sister. Yeah, the adult definition in Islamic law is a little different, yeah. So puberty essentially is the general definition of when a person becomes legally liable in the eyes of the Sharia. So you're exempt until you pass puberty. Puberty is demarcated in women by the commencement of their menstrual cycle, and in males it is demarcated by either the occurrence of wet dreams, right? They've started developing biologically these fluids and emitting them in their sleep. Some scholars would say by the clear, observable sort of hair markers, right? The pubic hair and all the underarm hair and otherwise. And some scholars would say if none of that happens, then at 15, they automatically become a male. And they got that from the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, prepare to be blown away, if you haven't heard this before, used to send back the companions and refuse to let them fight at 14 years old, and would allow them to pick up the sword and come along at 15 years old, as he did with Abdullah ibn Umar in Uhud and things like this. So 15 would be the automatic welcome to manhood. Any other questions? Go ahead, Shaykh.
for the voluntary fast, is the niyyah intention required the day before or?
Oh, that's a good question. When is the intention required? In the hadith of Hafsa radiallahu anha, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Man lam yajma' as-siyama bilaylin fala siyama lahu." Whomever does not become collected, meaning like they're decided, they conclude that they're going to fast by night, meaning before dawn, before Fajr, there's no fasting for them. So there's a few exceptions to that. Of them is that you didn't know it was Ramadan. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah and others said you're not obligated to have an intention when you didn't even have the knowledge that you were supposed to have the intention. So that's like accidental. That's the first thing. The second thing is scholars have permitted a wholesale intention. Like you've intended to fast Ramadan, that intention continues going. You don't have to sit there and sort of play mental gymnastics. You know, if you broke your fast in the middle of Ramadan, like for reasons, legitimate or not, you've interrupted your intention, you want to make a new intention. Okay, I'm starting again tomorrow, right? But otherwise, your intention to fast a month is sufficient. And your eating of suhoor or even setting an alarm for suhoor is clear enough proof that you intend to fast, because who eats suhoor without fasting? That's just like loss of sleep, right? And so these indicators are clear signs that you've decided at heart that tomorrow is a day of fasting for me. And an exception to this also would be non-obligatory fasts, because we have the hadith of Aisha in Sahih Muslim, where she says the Prophet ﷺ came into my room one morning and he said, "What do we have to eat?" She said, "We have nothing." Nothing in his house, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said, فَإِنِّي صَائِمٌ. Then in that case, I'll fast. I'll add this to my days of fasting. And so that was in the morning. So he said you have to have the intention by night. So they said the way to reconcile is this was a voluntary fast, and he must have intended the obligatory fasts. Need to be intended by night. And Allah knows best. But that's what I mean. You don't have to have the niyyah every day. You just have to have the niyyah to fast. And you don't need to renew that niyyah or sort of restate that niyyah or whatever unless you've interrupted your niyyah. Then you have to restart, right? Like if I had to take a week of cortisone or something, right? And I finished the course and I want to fast again, then you got to clearly decide before the morning if you're going to fast or not. That's what a niyyah is. The niyyah, the intention, is a decision of the heart. I've decided, right? Some scholars permit for you to say it, but to require people to say, I have intended X, Y, and Z, has no basis in our Sharia. The Sahaba never did this, right? And so some scholars permitted it because they rationalize that people that have like obsessive compulsive disorders or have self-doubt, you just want to hear yourself say it, so you stop thinking, fine. But to institutionalize it, it's very hard to defend this. As a sunnah, as part of a fundamental part of the deen, people think, I didn't state it. It doesn't really matter. Even Imam Ahmad, to prove to you the point, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, they asked him about a man, I don't recall now, was it Imam Ahmad or this is the position in the madhab? Basically the Hanbali scholars say, I came out to pray Isha. I know where I'm going, I know how many rak'ahs I'm making, I know what time they start. All right, I'm coming to pray Isha. And then just absent-mindedly, I said before I started, I intend to pray Salatul Maghrib. Then I go, Allahu Akbar. Then it hits me, wait a minute, this is Isha. Why did I say Maghrib for? I came here for Isha. I never pray Maghrib in the masjid or something like that, right? What do? You made the wrong intention. They say, this means nothing. Right? This is what mattered. قالوا الكلام هدر. It's, dismissible. Because the locus, like the location of the intention is actually where? The heart. So you don't have to say. And even if you say, but you meant something different, you're still good on the intention side. So that's what really matters. Any final questions? I see you getting exhausted and you're being very patient with me. Some of you are just being respectful by staying behind, and I commend you. Allah reward you and increase you in knowledge, not deprive you of the reward of this gathering. Sister, please, go ahead. If one didn't what? If someone breaks their fast on purpose, without an excuse? Okay. They make up one. Unless they broke their fast with intercourse. In that case, they have to fast 60 days for it. There is none. No. Yeah, it's controversial, but basically the scholars agree that they agree on penalty existing, or it being haram in general, whether there's a penalty or not, it being haram to break your fast when it's an obligatory fast, right? When it comes to a voluntary fast, they dispute it on whether you're obligated to continue once you started, because they'll say, wait a minute, if you enter a prayer, even if it's sunnah prayer, are you allowed to just walk out? No, you're not, right? So then they said, does this apply to fasting as well? But it may not be the case. There may be more flexibility in the fast than in prayer. And you are sometimes allowed to just walk out of your prayer. If it's a non-voluntary prayer, and there's sort of certain reasons, you can walk out. So voluntary in general has more flexibility than obligatory. I'm trying to be gender egalitarian here, people. Help me. Any other questions? Wait, let me just give other people a chance in case. You have a question? We're auctioning off questions here. Go ahead, Sheikh.
So, the question is, it's suhoor time and Fajr time arrives and the adhan begins, and some people are drinking water at that.
There are scholars who have stated that the Sahaba, you know, felt it was okay to swallow after hearing the adhan, but don't add to what you've eaten or drank. Like put the cup down, but you don't have to spit it out. And this could be of, you know, the rahmah of the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you're not being asked to remove something that was halal a second ago and is already in your mouth, right? You think of it like psychologically speaking, it's a little different than okay, no more, right? So there is, of course, the general rule is that, you know, you want to err on the side of caution. General rule is, you know, maybe even leave a little bit of a buffer. There is, you know, the hadith about between suhoor and fajr salah was about a 50 ayah span, right? SubhanAllah, they were so close to the Quran, they would measure things by Quran. The Sahaba, right? They would say the Prophet's witr was about as long as Surah Al-Inshiqaq, and the time between suhoor and fajr was about 50 ayahs. So think of 50 ayahs, like 3-4 pages. 3-4 pages is what? Maybe 10 minutes. So you want to create like a buffer. Last question, go for it. Brushing your teeth while you're fasting is recommended, because brushing your teeth is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that he emphasized to the world, and doing it every single day. Soft brushing every single day before the wudu, when you wake up, before you go to sleep. So around the clock, whenever you can, to refresh your mouth is from his sunnah. If you mean how about toothpaste, without getting into whether fluoride or charcoal or anything is good or bad for your mouth. I'm not that guy who's going to be able to debate on this. But taste-wise, fiqh-wise, like whether it will break the fast, if you're cautious enough to make sure it doesn't near your throat, like you're just careful, then you're okay. If you're afraid, then brush your teeth after you break your fast and before Fajr time. That works as well. But you know, some people want to like brush their teeth because of like the smell of their mouth. Brush your teeth because it's good to brush your teeth for so many reasons. But you know, one of the hacks is they say brush your tongue because the smell comes from the tongue. But you know, that doesn't do everything, because some of the smell comes from in here. And so the most important hack is just to know that this is a moment of sacrifice, and that the Prophet ﷺ said that the odor that inevitably comes up from the fasting person's mouth will be sweeter than musk in its smell. It will be so fragrant on the Day of Judgment when you meet Allah. So just the difficulty, the inconvenience, just flip it on its head and await the great reward for it on the Day of Judgment as well, after brushing your teeth. Don't get me wrong. Do all of that and brush your tongue as well, but know that if it's still sort of, it is a little bit intended, right? The inconvenience is a little bit intended. It's what separates the devotees from those who will do what's convenient when it's convenient. May Allah make us truthful devotees to Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khalas, we need to stop because it's Maghrib time. Jazakallah khairan, everyone. And we ask Allah to grant us from the fear of Him that which would prevent us from disobeying Him, and grant us acts of obedience that would deliver us to His paradise, and grant us conviction and certainty that would lighten for us the calamities of this world, and allow us to enjoy our hearing and our sight and our strength till the very last day of our lives. And we ask Allah to not allow our vengeance to be against anyone except those that have wronged us, and to support us against those that hurt us, and to not make this world the greatest of our concerns or the extent of our understanding. Do not allow our tragedy to be in our religious commitment, and to never empower against us those that would not have mercy on us. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على